it's nice for us to be recognized again at the state level for some of the things we were doing. And Madam Chair,
Can you repeat the name of the grant, please?
I sure will. It is the DPI Teacher Compensation and Advanced Teacher Roles Grant. So it was very competitive, and again, it's nice to be recognized for some of the things we're doing, and again, bringing additional funds to focus on our teachers. Those are hard funds to come by. And Madam Chair, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to the system on the awarding of that grant, and I know that the funds will be put to good use. There are no persons signed up for public input, so we will move forward with item 7 on the agenda, discussion, information, action items. Under information, we have 3 items. A, 2020 remediation jumpstart. B, 2020-2021 reentry plan. C, and C, contract requiring board notification. So I'm going to turn it over for item A, the 2020 remediation jumpstart information. Dr. Wilson, I think that's you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
So we had Ms. Lewis and Ms. Humphrey and Ms. Schrock. They spearheaded the Remediation Jumpstart Summer Learning Program. You may remember that we received the funds from the state level, and they have a little bit of information to share with you.
Okay.
Ms. Lewis?
Good afternoon, board members. I'm very excited to be able to report on the Remediation Jumpstart because it was such a wonderful success for us here in Wilson. We invited students in grades K-3 that were at a level 2 or lower on iStation at that point, and we sent out 1,148 invitations for students to attend. We did have 170 students that attended. The 4th grade students we invited were our transition students that struggled from 3rd grade the year before. We had 141 of those were actively engaged, which was awesome. And this was just a little supplemental summer learning program due to students being affected by COVID. We did provide reading and math instruction synchronously. We had live instruction daily, Monday through Thursday. We also had some asynchronous learning for students to do. And we also offered paper and pencil for students that were not able to get online or didn't have access. However, we were able to give out devices for those students that needed them and hotspots for anyone. We did not run out, so anyone that wanted access was able to be given access. So I do want to thank technology for helping to provide that for us. We had 5 directors that were coaches or assistant principals over each grade level, and they oversaw the 48 teachers that we had employed. The program ran Monday through Thursday, July 13th through the 30th, and we saw increases in all the students' achievement, it was wonderful to see. We actually had some 1st graders that were struggling that ended on the end of 2nd grade reading level by the end of those 3 weeks. The classes were small. Teachers only had about 3 students in them, which was another amazing part of it. We gave out plenty of resources. Each student that attended got a grab and go bag, and it had 10 books in it just for those students to keep at home and read with their students, and their parents. We gave out resource kits, math manipulatives, and we still have some computer program access that'll run through the whole year that we signed up for this summer. So we were just very excited with it was a new undertaking and a new challenge, but Ms. Schrock, Ms. Humphrey, the directors, everybody came together, and the parents were very positive. It was kind of like a preview for them for how this fall synchronous learning would be. And they said it was so much better than the spring. They were just looking forward to the year. So it's good when something you're trying out for the first time turns out well. So now we can continue to improve upon it.
So do you think that you will be able to utilize some of those tools as we go into this first grading period, this synchronous learning for those students who may be having some difficulties?
Yes, ma'am. We actually were able to get over 2,000 slots for Lexia Learning, which helps with students struggling with learning, and we will actually have that through next summer. So we'll be able to continue using that. And the math manipulative kits, the students are still able to use those as well. And we have something called Do the Math, which is some extra math modules online to help students with that. And we have access to that for this year as well.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead. Was that Mrs. Powell?
that was Ms. Barnes.
Mrs. Barnes, I'm sorry.
Request for Ms. Lewis. I had several parents, and I'm familiar with Seesaw, obviously. I don't know what public entities are listening, but several questions have been asked of me from parents exactly what is Seesaw. So just a quick summary, please.
Seesaw is a learning management platform, and it's an area where work can be posted for students, lessons can be recorded and put in there for parents to look at later times. Assignments can be posted in there, but at the same time, parents can take pictures and submit their child's work into Seesaw as well, so it keeps everything together. And that's for our Case 2 students.
And for those students who are utilizing paper pencil, the things that are put in Seesaw, are they made available to those students in paper pencil format?
Yes, ma'am, they are. And we've even had some parents, a lot of them do have a cell phone, and they will take a picture of the assignment and send it to the teacher so the teacher can grade it that way.
Okay. Any other questions in regard to the 2020 remediation jumpstart info? All right, we thank you. I know that was a huge undertaking, and we're glad that the efforts were successful with the students, and we look forward to those tools being utilized as we move forward, particularly with remote learning. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next is the 2020-2021 Reentry Plan C. Is that Dr. Wilson again,
Yeah,
or is that Dr. Mills?
it's all of us, Madam Chair, board members. We just wanted to give you a brief update on some parts of the reentry plan
Okay,
and some things from various areas, whether instruction, administrative services, or human resources, and kind of just touch base with you about a few things since the last time we went through it.
okay.
That sound good?
It does. I have a few questions. I'm sure the other board members may have some as well as
I'm
you
sure.
go through that. So
Okay.
the floor is open for you.
Okay, so we have, the last time we were in the official board meeting, outside of the policy meeting, we presented the reentry plan that was the overview of what our plans were. And so based on that, we decided, the board's decision, we decided to create a reentry plan to give our staff, our administrators, as well as our teachers, teacher assistants, at all levels, some kind of format, some kind of anchoring tool to be able to look back on at what it needs to look like in the Plan C. So again, we will do something very similar to this when we get into Plan B. Matter of fact, we've already started thinking about how we're going to be doing that. So we want to go to the page that has like a title page, Safe Environments, Instructional Expectations and Support and Human Resources.
Okay.
And this tool is broken down into those 4 components. And what we're going to do today is do a brief overview, and however you would like to go into that section, such as safe environments, and then If there are questions within that area, then we can talk about what the questions are before we move into the next section. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So in the safe environments, Dr. Williams and his staff handled that area, and you can see the areas. When you look at this document online, every one of those titles are hyperlinked, and they would take you. So while this is a hard copy, the online version works very well because you can hover over that and it'll take you straight to that.
Okay.
It does. All right, Dr. Williams.
That's right. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. For the safe environment section, we focused back in on our staff entering back into the building, and we identified some things as far as front office, hallways, and areas by which our staff members would be. Put protocols in place, for example, the 6 feet distancing, face mask, and just the washing of hands. We'll be moving back into restrooms and classrooms and the transportation in terms of riding the bus when we begin to enter into Plan B. So we just made sure that we had put things in place for our principals to be able to share with their staff. We did a training video that was demonstrating the screening procedures and utilized our thermometers and our screening logs that we utilize every day with our staff members coming in. As we receive updates and changes from the state, we'll make those updates and make sure that our principals get those and get them out so they can relay those to the staffs at the school as well. The next section that we'll go into will be student meals, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Miss Mary Catherine Talton to give an update on child nutrition. Yes,
Before
ma'am.
you
Yes,
go
ma'am.
into that next section, I realize that this is a work in progress and that there are going to be some changes. But under hallways, you say staggered arrival and departure schedule. So I assume that that's going to be in relation to when buses arrive, when carpool students arrive, when walking students arrive. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. So
Okay.
with the hallways, what we want to do is we have two entrances. Once we have students that are back in the building, we'll have two entrances. One entrance will be for our bus riders. They will have been screened before they got on the bus. That arrival time is typically at certain times per bus. So we'll make sure that we stagger getting onto the halls from the areas that
Okay.
they're coming in at, and we'll do so in the front as well. The other piece to that, Dr. Fitch, is to make sure that when we're leaving classrooms to transition to other areas as needed, whether bathroom breaks or whatever the case may be, that we stagger those so we do not have too many people in the hall at one time, schedule those out so
Okay.
that we're making sure that we're socially distanced in the hallways.
Okay. And under restrooms where you have hand sanitizer provided when students return to class, will we have sufficient amounts of hand sanitizer? Is the system providing the hand sanitizer? Because as I started reading through the document, it was looking as though there's expectation that the teachers are providing the hand sanitizer. What is the situation with hand sanitizer?
Yes, ma'am. We've received hand sanitizer and disinfectant, and if I would, I'll just let Mr. Letchworth speak to our delivery of supplies and what we have on hand and how we plan on utilizing it. Mr.
Okay.
Letchworth?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And Board, I would like to answer, I think your question directly is, we're not sidestepping hand washing in the restroom. That's one thing the health department wants to emphasize, but we are.
Can you all hear Mr. Letchworth?
Not well,
Not well.
Okay, so we will, can you hear me better now?
no.
It's like an echo.
Tap your mic. It's not on.
It's not on. Slide it a little bit. Okay, I'll fix it.
Dr. Williams, will you let him use your mic for the moment?
So we will provide hand sanitizer. We have hand sanitizer on site at maintenance as well right now, currently ready to go. But hand washing in the restrooms would still be done as a normal hand washing with the soap that is provided.
Okay. Could everyone hear that response?
I could, Dr. Fitch, but as a follow-up, what type of physical barriers between the sinks are you referring to?
Uh,
Or describe?
Currently, right now, we have not mounted any to meet the ADA requirements. We're working on some right now. But you also still have to meet the ADA requirements as far as the barrier between sinks. So
Currently working on barriers for between sinks, in case you did not hear. Is that all right? Does that answer you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
And when I look at the classroom safe environment, Dr. Williams, I assume that this is a standardized diagram that the state is providing for these 800 square feet for elementary and 675 square feet for middle and high school. But I noticed that you only have 12 students and one teacher at the high school and 15 students and one teacher in the diagram. Are our classes actually within those numbers, and will we have to use other spaces such as cafeteria or auditoriums, gymtoriums, whatever the configuration happens to be, in order to allow for that distance? And I realize that they are turning all of the desks in the same directions in order to help facilitate that 6-foot distance. But with the number of students within our classrooms, is this going to be realistic?
When we have the social distance in the classroom, and yes, ma'am, Dr. Fish, that's correct. These are diagrams that are provided that we put in each classroom based off of the social distance capabilities within that classroom would determine how many students could be in. One of the things that we have identified to principals is that teachers would not have to remove furniture or remove desks. Just make sure that we have them sectioned off to where each student is within 6 feet of each other. Each classroom's square footage would determine that. So as they are in the process of going into their classrooms now to mark off areas to see which seats would be available, myself and Mr. Letchworth and Mr. Woodard have offered up to be able to come out to the schools if they are running into challenges as far as spacing is concerned to help find additional space as needed.
If we are in a situation where we don't have the space and we need to have second classrooms and all, will we be getting any additional help with additional teachers in order to be able to make sure we're facilitating those 6-foot requirements?
To my knowledge, we will not receive any additional allotments for teaching staff.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
I mentioned it at an earlier meeting. I'm sure Dr. Wilson will remember. I still don't like having kindergarten and first grade students all in individual desks. Wouldn't there be the possibility of us buying the partitions that are so prevalent in places to allow them to sit at a circular or a rectangular table and be partitioned off?
We can probably make some
Yeah.
with the kidney tables and all those that we
The
love so
round
much,
tables.
and the square tables.
Mhm.
If we look at what the maintenance staff, Mr. Letchworth and his staff did for our safety shields at the entranceways and the offices, I'm sure there's some things we could do on some of those tables as we go through and evaluate classrooms too.
Yes.
And much like what they're having to do with restroom facilities, if we can, because we can custom make those to fit, that's something we can take a look at in those K1, K2 classrooms.
we've made some already for the EC department.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
testing and some little pieces to cover their little booklets too.
Can you hear that, Ms. Boyette?
Yes,
Okay. Is that what you're getting at?
yes. I just want it to be a natural classroom. I mean, as natural as it can be. And I know I've seen a lot of those on different sites that and principals have seen them as well.
Yeah.
But
It'd be better for us to do ours. They're quite proud of them. So the ones we've been doing will fit just to those tables and be a lot more sturdy.
Plus, what you indicated was the cost savings.
The cost
and what
savings was about
maintenance has been able to do
Maintenance did
versus
those
the
for the-
commercial.
for the front office spaces for about $60, and one price we saw was $489 a shield. So, and they have done a great job of custom fitting them and making sure they're safe and compliant, and I mean, just amazing to save us and be able to do that quickly too. So I think that's something we can look at when we walk and check those classrooms too, Ms. Boyette. I like a kidney table myself much better than I do a regular table, so I'm with you.
And not just the kidney when you're teaching, but just the kids sit at round tables, and
Yeah.
every kindergarten I've ever been in, you put them at some tables so that they can look at each other.
I'm more of a kidney than a round, but I know what you mean.
Well, I'm sure that
That's a
Mr.
good point.
Letchworth and
That's a good
staff
point.
will be able to fabricate whatever is necessary as they have done in the past. So, any other?
Madam Chair, I do have a question about the library. The same will be for the library when students return, obviously.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. So the social distance requirements would be the same in the libraries and media centers. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions before we move into student meals? Okay, so I guess it's Ms. Talton now.
Ms. Stout.
Ms. Talton, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
You're welcome.
We only had one update to the student meals portion of this, and that update is allowing for all of our students to go to any school site to pick up for their meals rather than having to go to their individual enrolled school site, which is only one update, but I feel that that's a pretty large accomplishment for our staff to accommodate that, so that students can go anywhere in the county to receive their meals.
Okay. That is a big change, but I still have a couple of questions if I can raise them, please.
Sure.
We know that some of our students have no transportation and they are bus riders or whatever else, or whatever the circumstance creates that. If the students have to, or the family has to pick up the meal from the school site, what about for families that have no transportation to schools in order to have meal pickup? And I think my next questions will be answered when we get to the CEP expansion, because my questions were, how will we handle income eligibility if need is known but no application has been made, and if there are multiples spread across grade levels? And I think in that expansion piece, there may be an answer to that question. But I'd like to go back to question one. What about those families who have no transportation? We know that the hunger issue among our students is high. And you did a yeoman's task in the food delivery over the summer and during the pandemic when we were out of school in March, starting in March. Is there any way that we can have some type of similar effort where food goes out rather than having the families have to come and pick up?
To hopefully answer that question, I'm not sure that it will be the favored answer. However, where we're sitting right now, in the spring, we were able to utilize the yellow buses. The General Assembly allowed us to utilize funds through transportation to be able to do that. At this time, that has not been allowed as an ongoing situation. Those funds have not been released for us to utilize for school meals. So that is where our hindrance is at this moment. One thing that we've done to help to alleviate that problem is, instead of opening 11 sites as we did in the spring, we have decided to open all of our sites, which I believe we discussed previously. But one of the reasons behind that was to allow our students to have closer access to the meals rather than to have to only go to one of those 11 sites.
It's not particularly an answer that I like. You're absolutely right, but we have to work within the confines of what we have. But I certainly hope that parents are able to get to our schools in order to be able to pick up those meals.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mercer?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. It wouldn't be our responsibility necessarily, but would it help to have an effort for civic organizations to possibly take on such a responsibility, and/or since our systems now, information management systems, know where students are and also can identify students are near them, to have someone possibly get parents to work together. It's a time of need, and I think it would be great if someone that didn't have transportation could be assisted by a neighbor that does. And for that to possibly happen, someone might have to suggest it or coordinate it, or is that a possibility?
Dr. Fitch, if I could, I can
Yes,
speak
you
to
may.
that.
Yes, you may, sir.
Dr. Fitch, Mr. Mercer, one of the things that we can do is myself and Ms. Talton, we could take a look at what the prospects or possibilities would be within the regulations and guidelines that we're having to operate with in terms of who can assist us with coordinating those efforts. We do know, because of the flexibility that we do not have with the funds that we had previously in the spring with transportation, that the yellow buses wouldn't be an option. We wouldn't be able to do that. However, I can coordinate with Ms. Talton to find out what regulations are in place that would, even if it was not actually taking, if it was organizing something civically or locally, to be able to facilitate that effort.
Okay.
So she and I will communicate on what the regulations are, the guidelines we have to operate in, and see how we can involve our community partners with that process.
I would like to, and I thank you for saying that you all will look at that, because I think that that is critical. We know that we send food home on weekends with community partnership, and we know that there's an awful lot of hunger, and I would not like to think that we would have students, the meals are prepared, but yet the access is limited for families.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay.
Absolutely. We'll begin working on that and finding out how we can work with our community partners on that.
Okay, thank you so much. And was I correct, Ms. Talton, that my second set of questions are basically answered in the expansion that you'll be talking about a little bit later?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay, then we'll let this,
We will definitely get those questions answered.
okay, then we'll let you move forward. Any other questions in regard to student meals, members of the board? Okay, so we're at preventive measures, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Fitch, at this point, the only update we have in terms of the preventative measures, these are things that have already been in place from the previous plan, but I will let Mr. Letchworth give an update on our PPE delivery and where we're at with that at this time.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All of our PPE that was provided by emergency management has been delivered to each school, as well as the masks that come from the state DPI. So all of that has been delivered out to the schools. We currently have, our supply of PPE on hand at our maintenance shop, but we did get all that delivered out to the schools.
All right. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Mrs. Barnes?
We just owe kudos to our maintenance department because I don't care what issue we're having, it seems like we've got someone from that department able to meet our needs. And then Dr. Williams, I think the last time recognized you as a personal point for all the work you've done, just coming on board, and you really are bringing a lot to the table, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And amen to that.
All right.
And Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
I want to know, what does the mask look like that the state provided? And, do we have a plan, or what kind of plan are we going to use for distributing the 5 to the students?
As far as the way the masks look, Mr. Letchworth, these are the cloth mask. Is that fairly similar to what I got? I guess I'll hold it up in the screen here. It's very similar to these, like the cloth mask that you might could purchase, online. There are 5 in a pack for these cloth masks. The principals already have theirs to distribute to their staff members. And in our upcoming principals meetings, we'll be discussing the procedure for checking out the students as they begin to come back into the building as well. So many of the things that relate to checking them back or screening students and things of that nature, we're transitioning into now as we begin looking at Plan B and preparing for that. So we will have a plan in place for the distribution to our students.
Okay, will they be able to write their names on?
I would imagine so. I'm not sure are they able to be written on that you can tell? With a marker, highlighter?
With a Sharpie or
Yeah,
something.
with a Sharpie or something along those lines.
Otherwise, they'll be lost.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's right.
Are they washable?
Yes.
Yes, sir, they are.
Now, if a student, because I saw that and I made a question to myself, wear a cloth covering over your nose and mouth. And I was wondering now, if I left home, I didn't have my cloth when we go back, and my parent provides me with a paper or disposable, is that going to be accepted? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. If they have a surgical mask when they came in, this language came out of the K-12 toolkit for Safer Schools, North Carolina.
Okay.
So pulled that language right out, and it specifically cites cloth masks. But we know that the surgical masks are extremely effective in preventative measures as well. So as long as we have our mask, our face covering, we'll be utilizing those.
And for those parents who are super safe and have the protective shields, and they wear the mask and the shield, that's going to be perfectly fine.
Yes, ma'am. If they have a shield available, absolutely.
Okay.
Any additional questions on our PPE delivery?
Okay.
This next section is in relationship to what I've spoken on earlier in regards to training for our staffs for monitoring and screening. These are, again, all of the processes and procedures that have been taken out of the Safer Schools North Carolina Health Toolkit K-12 and give guidance in terms of the screening process, guidance on suspected and presumed cases, and monitoring symptoms throughout the day. Again, there's no changes on these. These are the same as they have been before. Anytime we do receive updates, myself and Mr. Letchworth both are checking these every morning when we come in to see if any updates have come through. And if there are, we update them on our reentry guideline. We make sure we get that information out to our schools as well. Transportation section is not in this one because we do not have students returning under Plan C, but we do want to make, Mr. Harvey is on the call, and I just wanted to give him an opportunity to speak just for a minute on how we're working with our drivers to make sure that we are staying employed and utilizing their skills and talents and abilities while we do not have buses running at this time, if I may turn it to him.
Mr. Harvey, can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Williams. With our full-time drivers, I know one of the concerns was how they will maintain employment during the time where they're not able to drive. So what we are able to do is to train them to be screeners at school sites. So they can assist in that endeavor, so they can kind of help screen people coming in and out of the building. So schools don't have to use their personnel to do that. That'll allow them to continue working so they can keep their benefits and won't create any additional hardship for them, while also helping schools not have to use their personnel to do screenings when they could be used in other areas.
So are these drivers being staggered so that they're within their normally scheduled timeframes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we actually made contact with each individual driver and explained what this process would be, just to make sure that we were all on the same page. And scheduling, we're also going to work with what the needs of the schools are. If schools have needs for coverage at certain times, that's something that we'll coordinate with the driver to kind of iron that out, but they will not be exceeding the time that they normally would have gotten while on a school bus.
I see on the news that Wayne County and others are using the buses as hotspots. And so the drivers are taking buses in communities and the buses are equipped. Is that something that we're going to be doing to make sure that there is connectivity for students who may not have the hotspot or?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
And what I'll do, Mr. Harvey, I'll let you speak to our plan for that. But Mr. Mayo's on the call too, I think, to speak to the hotspots, the mobile hotspots, if we could. And then we'll talk about our end on transportation, how we'll partner up with that.
Yes, good evening, board. Just to let you know that we got 6 hotspots delivered for buses this past Friday. So just got to get with Mr. Harvey and Dr. Williams to get that ready and executed, and then come up with a plan for as far as looking at the areas of need for where these need to be.
Do you think you'll get more than 6, or is that going to be our maximum?
We're going to try the 6, and they said for us to see what the usage was, and then from there, they were willing to give us some more. We were very fortunate to be a part of the Governor's Coalition Group. So with this, we were able to get the free hotspots and the free service.
Okay.
And it's unlimited. So we're excited to test it out and to see which areas can hold it. We still have some rural areas here in Wilson County that may not be able to benefit from this, but we're definitely going to do our best to place these strategically. Again, just working with Mr. Hervey and Dr. Williams.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
And Dr. Fitch, just one last thing from our end, from Administrative Services. I just want to take a moment before we transition over to Dr. Wilson's piece to publicly thank every member of the Administrative Services team, Ms. Talton, Mr. Harvey, and Mr. Letchworth, and their staffs and their teams for working tirelessly to make sure that we have a safe and smooth transition into this Plan C and moving into Plan B. And they'll continue to work in that effort. So I just want to thank them publicly for that.
Thank you so much. Dr. Wilson,
Ready for the next part?
ready for the next part?
Okay, so the next section is the instructional expectations, and on page 15, there should be a video.
Excuse me, please.
Mr. Farmer?
I'm sorry. Please help me out here. On a confirmed case of the COVID-19 by one of our students, will we be involved in the contact tracing, or will we turn that over to the Wilson County Health Department?
That would be in the Wilson County Health Department.
But if the contact tracing involves many more of our students, i.e. a party or something that happens after school, would they get back to us immediately because time would be of the essence?
Yes, we've been in direct contact daily, sometimes all day. So yes.
Well, I saw where contact tracing was not mentioned anywhere in the symptoms or the handling of suspected or presumptive cases. So I just wanted to ask that question. I'm sorry, Dr. Wilson.
That's okay.
So whenever you do update of this, if you would include the fact that in cooperation with the health department, contact tracing is occurring or will occur should we have any reported outbreaks.
Yes, ma'am. We can make that addition by tomorrow.
I think it's in the toolkit.
Yes, sir.
We were just transferring some information over, but it's in the toolkit.
Okay.
But Teresa Ellen and her staff, especially Teresa from the health department, have been answering calls all hours of the day and night, anytime we need them, and it's been fabulous.
Angela Manning.
Angela Manning.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about all them. Mark Holyoke at the hospital. We've been very lucky to be able to pick up the phone anytime and call them, and they've been so helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in great shape.
All right. Does that help you, Mr. Farmer?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very kindly.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we move into the remote learning and virtual academy from Dr. Wilson? All right, Dr. Wilson.
Okay, so what you have in this section is just about Plan C. There might be some parts that will be also implemented, such as the remote learning and the virtual academy in Plan B, but nothing in this document is referring to some of those other parts. So this is truly a Plan C section of the instructional expectations.
Well, before you go any further, I'd like to thank you and your staff for the follow-up that was done once selection of virtual academy and remote learning was done, because there was some confusion and points of clarification that needed to be made so that people truly understood the selection of the virtual academy versus the remote learning and the differences entailed. And you and staff were very good at getting back to the community and making sure that parents were clear on the option that had been chosen. And thank you so much for all of that follow-up that occurred.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That we certainly wanted to make sure that our families knew what they were choosing. Each of our school level administrators called the families and talked to them. And then we had some families that also called at central office level and talked to different staff here at this level. And it was very helpful to hear their questions, because their questions allowed us to be able to develop whatever the tool was that to help explain. And what you see on page 15 is just a snapshot of a video. And so if your video doesn't work, we'll hook you up. We'll get you so that you can see that video. Mr. Linden and Ms. McFadder also joined me in that video, and Mr. Mayo and Ms. Edwards videotaped it upstairs. That's what we were using those two signs for, that we were putting up at the beginning of the meeting. It was very helpful to hear the questions of the community to help us know how to provide that feedback.
I think the principals did a good job reaching out
Thank
to a
you.
large number in their APs to give them a chance to touch base with them and almost do a wellness check like we did with our staffs. And it was a lot for them to do right before the beginning, there's no doubt.
Yes.
But they really helped us by doing that. And there was no easy way to do it either, because it was so confusing. And so I know that they did, made a lot of phone calls in addition to that. So I'd like to thank them. So if you see them, they probably had phone ear after a while, from making the calls, but they did a good job of reaching out and doing that. That set us apart.
It was very important to do so because we had over 1,500 who signed up for Virtual Academy. And as of today, we have a little over 900. So that, it was very important. And I do think that the school level administrators did a phenomenal job to be able to help our families make those decisions. It's a learning process for us all.
Is that Mrs. Barnes?
Yes, it is. I
Yeah.
have a question upon some of the questions I've been asking. I don't know whether it was asked of Dr. Wilson or not, but I'm still getting questions about the average class size of our EC classrooms. Do you have any information for us, Dr. Wilson, on what our average class sizes have been for EC students?
Well, I think that would vary. are you speaking about in the remote or in the virtual academy?
In the remote and in general, because those are the type of questions I'm still getting from parents.
All right, so what the direction we have received from DPI is that whatever class size restrictions we had on the K-3 setting, we would need to follow. So for sure, in the K-3, we have to adhere, whether it's virtual academy or in the remote learning. And the same would be true for our exceptional children classrooms as well. So, and at this point, I've not heard anyone to say that the numbers in the synchronous learning or the asynchronous or the class load in Power School does not look any much different than what we had last year, starting of the school year.
Okay.
All right.
So pages 16 and 17 talk a little bit more about the differences, and you had already seen those pages before, but we wanted to share that with our staff as well. Page 18, the same thing. And then we got into the effective instructional lesson design because we wanted our staff to understand how to design the lessons. And there are many things that are different about online learning and paper pencil kind of online learning when we're not having students in front of us. However, there are some things that are still the same. And you'll see that information on pages 19 and then pages 20. And then on page 21, we went through some remote learning teacher expectations. And again, they came from a lot of the questions that we were receiving to try to address those. And then on page 22, we went through the virtual academy teacher expectations of what that would look like. We had to do a little shift in what we were planning to do at one point with our virtual academy. And so I really feel like that the change that we had to shift into actually is for the better of our students as families get to see that maybe the virtual academy may not be what they were expecting, because it is a self-paced. It may not be what families had thought it was going to be. And so the plan that we have in place for our virtual academy students, in the long run, I think it's going to be the very best for them. And then page 23, we wanted to make sure that our staff understood about the content and grading, because in the spring of the year, there was very limited grading, if at all, particularly at our elementary and our middle school. So we wanted to share that. And on that same page talks about that word seesaw that Ms. Barnes had mentioned. And then on page 24 talks about the submission of the assignments and what are some opportunities if you're providing your assignments online to your teachers as well as offline, because we do want to make sure that our families who are offline know exactly how to receive that or to get that information, as well as our teachers and how they need to provide that feedback. On page 25 talks about the attendance. That's another big difference. And what we had in the spring of the year, attendance was not accounted for. This year, we're starting the 2021 school year where we are counting attendance. Today was the first day, and just like in a typical school year, today would be E1 if those students showed up. And we have some processes in place, and we are counting attendance just like the first 10 days that we did in years past. We're counting the first 10 days this year. There is one line that we've added a little bit different, is that if students are not in two-way communication with their teachers as of today, in years past, we may have waited until tomorrow to see if they show up. But today, the teachers have to reach out to their students. So if I have 28 students on my class list and I heard in two-way communication to 25 of them, then the expectation is within the next couple of days that the teacher needs to find where those other 3 are. And so on page 26 talks about the video conferencing. That's where that synchronous learning takes place, that live recording. Each of the lessons are recorded. That's a part of our board policy that says that anytime that a student is in the video conferencing, that lesson must be recorded. And to help out our students who may not be able to join online at that time frame, say at the 9:15 time frame, the teachers are going to upload that recorded session that they already have and put it into the Google Classroom or into the Seesaw Classroom, so that students who weren't able to log in would have access to that lesson. I think this will also be very helpful to our families who may have the parent may be working during the day and they need to go back and say, well, now how did that teacher teach that? So that may be one of those things that we do in the future that may come about that we hadn't done before, but maybe something that we might need to consider later on. On page 27, we provided our staff some information about the day. Our typical year, we have a staggered time period between our high school, middle school, and elementary. But in Plan C, we have everybody starting at 8 and ending the day at 4. Now, certainly, that doesn't mean that if teachers need to be able to reach out to their families, they wouldn't do that after 4. They're going to do that. But we wanted to give, one of the things that we heard from our families is that it was very confusing when you had multiple children in the household. Like I need to call this teacher at 8 o'clock, and then this teacher I can't call until 3 o'clock, and then this. So we have a standard 8 to 9 and a 3 to 4 time period for families. We also gave some recommendation on the screen time. That would be like the up to 1 hour for kindergarten. And then on pages 28 and 29 are our student expectations for remote learning. We do incorporate PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention Support System, in our district. And we have how it looks and sounds when students are walking to the bathroom, or how they're on the bus or in the auditorium or in a classroom. And so we've also given a framework for our teachers to be able to incorporate these as well. These are just suggestions for our teachers. Page 30 talks about the communication with families and what's the best way to do that and how critical it is, particularly in this time period. Page 31 talks about our special populations and we've given a brief description of how each special population, those teachers who are assigned to those students, will need to either offer the lessons or communicate with them.
Dr. Wilson.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. Is there anywhere that provides a more expanded description of what we're providing for our exceptional children and children with 504 plans?
Ms. McFadder, and she is not on the line today, but Ms. McFadder is meeting with the teachers, the program coordinators, as well as the program coordinators are meeting with the teachers to develop contingency plans. So I don't know that we have anything written out specifically that would expand on that, because I think it's so very much individualized. The contingency plan is what they're working on now, as well as we are testing students who need to be tested. We're working on following the 90-day timeline. We have some students that needed to be tested this past spring that didn't get tested. I know that we have those places set up. I think there are a total of 7 different rooms, and not 7 different locations, but 7 different rooms around the district for families to have their students tested. But this was more just for the staff, like an overview. I'm sure Ms. McFadder has something specifically for her staff in the world of exceptional children.
Because there have been a lot of concern shared from parents.
You're right.
Regarding what we're doing for this population. And I just want to make sure that that information is as prevalent and readily available as possible,
Okay,
because they're scared,
they
just like
are.
every other parent in the
That's been
district
shared
is.
across the state.
Yeah.
That's a concern that we all have in terms of, how do you share that? How do you individualize and how do you do those things and how do you get the word out and do that? And I think those are things that, our staff is working through, but there's no real easy way to do that other than contact and going through and talking to parents individually as well.
Yeah, we did talk about something that would be kind of broad, but when it came down to it, each individual child had their IEPs, and there has to be a discussion with the families and the teachers of which goals they're going to be able to meet virtually and which ones that may not be able to happen, such as the toileting. That would be something that would not necessarily be able to do virtually. So that contingency plan is extremely important. So they will be doing that with each family.
And Madam Chairman, it appears to me that every child will have to have an IEP meeting regardless of when the last one was and when the next one comes up, because of the virtual limitations for the goals and ramifications of each IEP and 504.
Other comments?
Chair.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Boyer?
On page 30, it talks about the Zophier app. Can somebody give me the 15-second explanation of what the Zophier app is?
Sounds Russian.
Well, I can give you a little bit of an explanation, but I see Mr. Mayo's online. I know it's to help families or to help the staff be able to contact without their cell phone number being shown.
It anonymizes the cell phone number.
He's shaking his head. I explained it.
Did I get it right, Matthew?
Yes. That way, we have the VoIP phone system, so if a parent calls the teacher, they can leave a voicemail. The voicemail goes straight to their email, and then they can use the Zophier app to call the parent back without having to give out their personal cell phone number.
So it's showing their school phone number.
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
it appears to me we may need a whole nother acronym page just because of this virtual world that we are involved in now. Zophier and Seesaw and God knows what else. Is that possible? Because I'm fairly knowledgeable, but I'm learning new words every day. And I'm sure it's very difficult on these parents.
Well, she just upgraded the acronym list, but she smiled. Dr. Wilson is smiling behind me because she's going, okay. So I think that something will be coming, but I appreciate the explanation for Zophier app. So that.
One last thing, I would make a personal request that we, in every instance that we can, use the word live instead of synchronous and recorded instead of
asynchronous.
I don't know why we have to be complicated when it's live and recorded.
I'm good with
Thank you.
I'm good with it.
And that's one of the things that parents are constantly asking, what does this synchronous mean? And what is this asynchronous? So yeah, we need to put live and recorded.
Okay.
I have a question on page 31.
All right, page 31. Yes.
Regarding the McKinney-Vento Act, where it's the last sentence or sentence before the last, where it says, in addition, the liaison will deliver packets and supplies to students' homes, but yet they are homeless. Does that mean to the Wesley shelter?
Whatever
Explain
their place of habitat is their home.
Where? Okay.
If it's a hotel room, if
Gotcha.
it's wherever.
Or even if the student, in the process of that year, finds residency.
Okay.
All right. So are we at
Okay.
page 32?
Yes. So another piece that we recognize that we need to make sure that we cover is the social and emotional learning for our students. So Ms. Nichols has put in this information for our staff to help them. And then on page 34, the expectation is still that our teachers be working with in professional learning communities. Now more so than ever. And I think it will also offer the opportunity for teachers across the district to be participating in professional learning communities between, say, some of the smaller schools that might only have one teacher in that grade level, to be able to coordinate with a teacher from another school with only one. So we're going to look at the positive for that as well. Then on page 35, you'll see the difference between remote learning in the spring and then the fall. This is the document that Dr. Mills shared last week on the 10th that was shared at the state level, that out of the top 10 list, Wilson County Schools received recognition for this document. So page 35 is our claim to fame. And then page 36 is about the difference between remote learning and virtual academy.
Mm-hmm.
So then we start in, that kind of connects to the instructional services, but we separated it into the support about what kind of support we're providing for our staff. And you see a little bit of information on here of how we have provided that support. Then we divided on page 38 and 39, the difference between the instructional support and then the technical support.
Before you go forward to that, on page 37, I was interested in the PD, the professional development for the parents and the students, and where we had questions about seesaw and all of that. How are the parents being made aware that that professional development is available to them?
I know that online, on Facebook, they've had it because there's a district parent meeting tomorrow night. I think it is from 7 to 8.
But for those who don't have that access, I have to ask, how is the professional development and the knowledge of that professional development going to get to these parents? And because we do have some parents who are opting for paper pencil, but still may want to know, how are we getting that information that there is something that's going to teach them about seesaw and all of this other stuff?
Well, if they are using the Seesaw or the Google Classroom, like tomorrow night's district family event is not going to be pertinent to them if they are using the paper pencil packets.
Okay.
They're not. This is for tomorrow night's event. Will be strictly for those who are doing the work online.
But I'm not on Facebook. I'm that parent not on Facebook to have seen that posting. How are you making them aware that this professional development to teach them about what can be used and how it's used? How are you getting that information?
I found out about it during orientation today.
Okay. And so is that same message going to everybody?
Yes.
Or just to Jones, because you said it's Jones or whatever?
Jones is hosting the
the
Yes.
event, okay.
I have a comment before we go too far from the social and the emotional piece. Dr. Fitch, and I've talked to lots of parents, my grandchildren included. What has really been successful with a lot of classroom teachers or parents has been to have their students to journal constantly. What has it meant to them to have been a part of the process of working online, and what have they done during the summer, and how do they cope with the change in their daily activities? And it's been very successful with a lot of people I know. So I hope when you have your parent conferences and PLCs, you'll really promote journaling.
Thank you for sharing that. All right. So, okay, let's go on with 38, the instructional support.
On page 38 is just, this is just a reminder of the different staff that we have there to support. And each of these links, they should be hot, they should be working there. And then on page 39 would be the technical support that we're going to be offering. One of the parts that's different for our staff and our families is the live chat, to where families can call in and work with troubleshooting. Mr. Mayo and his team are going to be available to troubleshoot any kind of problems that may arise. And hopefully this will cut down on some of those tickets, and then a 5-minute conversation can get it fixed without having to go through the process of creating a ticket, and then they not get the problem fixed until the next day, and then students are confused or families are frustrated, that kind of thing. And then the next part we go into is the human resources. Dr. Parker, I think, is online to share any kind of information.
Dr. Parker, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much.
Certainly. So page 40 just addresses our substitute process. We wanted to make people aware. Honestly, it really didn't change very much from the normal process of when a teacher needs to have a substitute. Imagine just the delivery of instruction is a little bit different. There probably need to be a little bit of a learning curve there. Page 41 deals with the teacher evaluation process. As we sit right now with NESIS, we're still looking for guidance from DPI on just how to address the instrument with remote learning. I've been on a couple of different HR Zoom calls as a region and across the state. PDPs are still expected to be done as scheduled. However, we're still waiting to see if there's any modification of the NESIS instrument as we move forward, because as it was originally designed, it wasn't designed to really be used for remote learning or to observe and evaluate remote learning. Page 42 is our telework agreement and law. So the telework agreement is linked into a one signed Google form that I sent out to all of our staff a little over a week ago. It is basically a step-by-step agreement where if someone chooses to work remotely, that there are some steps and some protocols that need to be followed and have some uniformity in that aspect. And if they also choose to work remotely, that the log will also be completed each day that they choose to work remotely. And that is all linked on page 43. So as you see, there is a classified and certified log linked for each school. I've answered numerous questions over the last few days from several principals, just on when it's appropriate to do the telework law. But so far so good. At 44 is the roles and responsibilities. This is a document that working in conjunction with Dr. Wilson and the rest of our senior staff and several directors. It references a link in the last sentence, and that basically tries to get some clarification of what roles and responsibilities are for different job descriptions in each aspect, whether we're in plan A, B, or C. Do you have any questions?
Any questions or comments, members of the board?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
what types of, I'm looking at page 43, what types of classified personnel can work from home?
At this particular juncture, maybe teacher assistants, but that has been a site-by-site decision in terms of principals and how they schedule their instruction.
So the state law about teacher assistants not being paid unless children are in school has been waived, or how's that being handled?
I don't know if it's been waived, but we're certainly making efforts to document, at least since March too. We've been taking efforts to document the daily activities of people if they're off-site. So all those things have to be documented. So if a person chooses to work remotely, in terms of family situation or safety, et cetera, we want to make accommodation for that.
Okay, but otherwise, teacher assistants could be helping with supervision or who distributes the food? Is that only the cafeteria staff or food service?
In terms of food service, yeah, I think and Ms. Talton can chime in, but right now I think cafeteria staff is primarily responsible for that.
That is correct.
So we don't use any teacher assistants or any of that then?
That's correct.
Thank you, Ms. Talton.
So does that answer your question, Mrs. Boyette? I think it will be at the discretion of the administrator as to how they're used, so that if in the online instruction, and they may have small groups that are working, we're still in school, it's just that we're remote, and so that the teacher assistants may be handling responsibilities in a remote fashion along with that teacher doing the live teaching as opposed to the synchronous. Was that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Other questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Powell.
Yes, I have a question about the substitute process, and it may be just some clarity that I need here, because when a teacher is absent, a substitute can be called in to take. And I see down here too, on page 40, it says emergency lesson plans. So in the event you're not able to call a substitute in, then you have emergency lesson plans that are recorded or asynchronous lessons that can be used in place of that. And then, so you have those two processes available?
Yes. So, as I mentioned in covering the last of page 40, there is a learning curve right now, because calling a substitute is a little bit different. It's not a body in the building anymore, at least for these first 9 weeks. It is trying to interface with that substitute, making them aware of your particular process and delivering remote instruction, and then moving forward from there. So yes, emergency lesson plans. Yeah, we would ask, of course, teachers to be prepared a few days in advance, just in case something happened. But yeah, the process of sort of handing over a classroom planning wise will look a little different.
Yes, and I'm thinking about some substitutes who probably have difficulty stepping into that type of role right now. So I was thinking that it's probably good to have the asynchronous or recorded lessons readily available.
Are we doing any professional development for those substitutes to bring them up to speed more or less with the remote instructional process and with all of the platforms that they may be exposed to?
Nothing, we haven't yet. We will have to work in conjunction with Dr. Wilson and with Mr. Mayo to try to make sure that we're telling them the right thing. Now, we have, of course, we went through the substitute list and that's been approved, but we haven't gotten them all in mass. We'll have to put something together in order to address that learning curve.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
This is Velma Barnes. I had at least 2 people who have called me about wanting to volunteer to help students. And one of them specifically wanted to go to Springfield because they knew that it was students that could probably get help where they didn't have parents that could do those things they needed. And Bill Barnes. And I told them they should go through you to make sure that the process for volunteering is the same as it was previous. Am I correct?
Yes, so the screening process in terms of the application, background check, et cetera, all those things would be the same. Then we will work with the on-site principal to figure out in which best mode they would best, be of service.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
I have a question. I think it would be, at this point, be directed to Dr. Wilson if it's proper.
All right.
Dr. Wilson, I had a person that operates and is the director at a child care, and they serve students from 3 different elementary schools. And they are very concerned about making sure that they do the best they can with the circumstances, helping children with their learning efforts. And the concern they had was knowing how they could manage students who will be on 3 different schedules because they're established at the elementary or at the individual schools. She said the only interruption would be is during the middle of the day when they have lunch. And they have their lunch schedule, and then each of the elementary schools have theirs. But was that concern more or less dealt with when you said if someone could not participate at a particular time of day, it would be arranged so that they could do it at a different time of day? Am I making any sense?
Yes, sir. I understand what you're asking. So if a student is able to listen to the teacher and the live recording at their scheduled time, then that works. But if the student is unable to do so, then that recording will be put into the student's learning management system or in that class learning management system. And then the families can go online, whether in the evening or if they are at another location to be checked on to do their lessons.
One of the things that concerned her was that, of course, now I know this person and they're conscientious. They want to help the children as much as we do. And of course, they're having the challenges, multi-level challenges, just also like we do. But, well, would it be better, you think, that if they, if the presentation is interrupted, do they have, when they go back, do they have to go back through the entire lesson, or can they go to the part that they missed?
I would think that they could go to the part that they missed. Now, the live recording lessons are not to be, we have shared with our administrators and our teachers that while a typical class, say at a high school or even at an elementary school of like, if you are face-to-face, maybe 30 to 40 minutes at a lesson for math or 75 minutes for reading, that's not the expectation that live recording would need to be 45 minutes or 75 minutes or 90 minutes. It really is to be in small chunks.
Okay.
So it should be fairly easy that student will be able to go back and find where their teacher was during that time.
What I will do with that particular person, I will revisit them. I'll make a point to go see them and discuss it. And if they haven't learned or I can't help them, I'm going to ask them if they could speak with you or a member of your staff.
Okay.
For the purpose of best serving the students is what the goal would be. Now, with that said, I have one other thing. It come to mind best practices, and Lord knows you guys have worked diligently and done an excellent job, but it just entered my mind that with all of that, if someone at a school has a challenge and find a way to meet it, it would be serving everyone well if they would share that. And I would suspect you may have something covering that already, but the thought just entered my mind and I couldn't let it pass without mentioning it.
Okay.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Dr. Fitch, I
Yes,
failed to
ma'am.
mention that some other family opportunities through the CARES funding. We have our instructional technology facilitators are available starting this coming Thursday night as well for our families. And we're using our CARES funding to help fund that.
And that will take place in what manner and at what time?
It can be on, like, through a phone.
Through the phone, okay.
Through the phone, or it can be like through the computer if they need to access to the child's computer, that kind of.
So what number would they call?
The number that's on page 39 with the technology department.
So I think we may, if I'm not mistaken, we may be being streamed again. So if it's in order, I'll give out that number now.
Okay.
So that persons who may be listening in, if they, at Thursday evening at what time?
Yeah, and Mr. Mayo is
Mr.
online.
Mayo?
He may have some additional information about that.
Yes, I'm double checking the times to make sure.
Okay, and that phone number will be 252-399-7870. 252-399-7870, which is the technology department for the school system for the open line instructional session that will be available.
And there's another number up top if that number doesn't work.
And if that number does not work, 252-399-7717. 252-399-7717. Mr. Mayo is looking for the time of that event on Thursday evening, and that will be a valuable resource for the community, for those who need the technology instructional piece. Mr. Mayo?
Yes, this Thursday night from 6:30 to 8, as well as next Tuesday and Thursday night from 6:30 to 8. So we have 3 sessions altogether.
Okay, 3 sessions available at the 2 numbers given, the 252-399-7717 and 252-399-7870. Thursday, the following Tuesday, and the following Thursday from what time again?
6:30 to 8.
6:30 to 8 o'clock. Thank you so much. Anything else?
I'm not
Madam
close
Chair.
to comment.
Oh, sorry.
Mrs. Powell and then Mrs. Barnes. I think Ms. Barnes said she wanted a closing comment. So, was that what you said, Mrs. Barnes?
Not for the meeting, but as far as the reentry plans.
Okay, Mrs. Powell.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barnes, for that. I have one comment and a question. I just wanted to just reiterate what Dr. Mills said earlier about the virtual conference that we had on Wednesday. I was one of the board members that participated in that, and we have a dynamic technology department and dynamic people that were presenters. So I feel really confident that our parents, once they come to the conferences, the sessions, and get in contact with whoever they need to, that's in charge of that particular question that they have, that they will get a good answer. I learned quite a bit. I sure did. It was great. I had good teachers, Leanne Orr, Joshua Robbins, Joseph Hayes, Stephen Sutton, Jennifer Lewis. They were fantastic. And I really enjoyed it. And I sat in front of the computer all day long. I think I could do that. But I just wanted to give them a shout out for what they did. And I'm really impressed. And my question is to Dr. Wilson or either Ms. Lewis about the question arose about the M class. I know beginning of the school year that all of our students, well, not all, but I think K-5 are screened in their reading abilities. And I know things are different, of course, we're in the new norm. So I didn't know if we were still able to screen or measure our students' reading abilities, or is that something that has to maybe happen later on?
We will be getting M-Class, we're getting M-Class back again. So we're hoping to have that up and running within a few weeks. So we will be doing running records with our students again in K3 to see where they are. K2, K1 is not online, that's with the teacher, but we do have 2 through 4 that will be able to be online, so students can work on that as well to get their reading tested. It's not for 5th grade. However, we are going to give a benchmark at the beginning of the year that would have been last year's 4th grade test, just to see where they are in reading in the beginning of this year, so we can target those skills at the beginning that they may be missing.
Okay, that's great, because I know how important it is to find out what they know at the beginning of the school, because I know when I taught, we always tested the students, especially in reading, to know what we needed to work on.
Yes.
And
We're looking forward to having M-Class back.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, thank you.
Good shout out, Mrs. Powell. Mrs. Barnes.
I just wanted, I know we're not closing out meeting, but just wanted to thank again Dr. Wilson, Dr. Parker, Dr. Williams, Dr. Mills for all the hard work that's gone into this plan. And I know we don't want to talk about inclement weather, but this is a plan that will easily be able to be used if we do have inclement weather. So it's good to have such a thorough plan in place that could also be used for that purpose as well.
That's right.
That's very true.
Point well made. Thank you.
I look forward to dealing with that again. I will never complain about weather again.
No.
Well, with remote learning, then
This will be very.
this will be the easiest hurricane season probably.
Yeah.
All
Y'all
right.
better start knocking on some stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
That's a real
Not
one.
now.
All right. So if there are no other
Snow is
questions or
what I'm talking
comments that we would like for the 2020-2021 reentry plan C, we thank the
Madam
administrator.
Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I'd like to revisit EC one more time, please.
Yes, sir. The floor is yours.
Yes, ma'am, I'm trying to get my thought about how I want to present this. I guess I want to present it to Dr. Wilson, if you can help me out. As a middle school resource teacher, I was required to be highly qualified in 6 areas. And those kids were pulled out of the classes and they came to my class on a regular basis, and I helped them with their individual education plan. Will there be a situation online for that to happen, or has resource rooms no longer there?
Mr. Farmer, Dr. Fitch, that we will definitely be having students who receive resource services also receive their services, their exceptional children's services that they need in this platform. Or if it's paper pencil, one or the other, online or offline. And the same would be true for our self-contained students. So all of our EC students will be receiving services. The services may look differently than what we would have expected prior to March the 13th, but our students will be receiving services. The EC teacher, the program coordinator, the EC team, the families will meet together to determine a contingency plan by looking at that student's goals and which of those goals that can be completed in a virtual type setting for not only this time with the COVID-19 and what we are experiencing, but as we just said a few moments ago, with inclement weather, so that our students would not be limited or not have their services even in inclement weather times. So that contingency plan that I mentioned earlier would cover more than just COVID-19. It would also cover if there's a hurricane, if there's snow, then what kind of services will our students be able to get? It's very difficult to say specifically what it's going to look like because I can imagine a student, 3 different students having 3 different contingency plans at what they are going to be able to receive. I know that Ms. McFadder and her team have ordered performance task kind of kits for their students. The other day when she and I were meeting, we were talking about that a delivery on a pallet had arrived to be able to distribute some information, to distribute some resources to the students. Another example that she gave me was you have a student who needs to respond to with a switch, their yes or their no. Well, in the classroom, that switch may be used by multiple students in a typical classroom. Well, she's had to order several of those because while at their home, it's a virtual setting and that student's going to need to have that switch and they're not going to be able to share. So her team has worked together to try to get these kind of resources to make sure that they are individualized for those students.
Well, I like that switch because I may have 7 kids in my room and each one of them be different, and I have to work with one a few minutes and work with another one a few minutes and work with another one and then come back. So I was actually, going from desk to desk, and I didn't know how that would be possible, but with this switch, that sounds very possible.
Yes. And again, I really, there are going to be some things that are going to come out of this that's going to be good for our students. And, we're taking the funds that we've been provided through the CARES funding to make this happen for those students. And again, I think that that's going to be a part of this contingency plan. When the team meets together, what are the tools, the resources that the student needs at his or her home to make sure that the virtual setting can be the very best, if at all possible. And again, as I said before, there will be some goals that are not going to be possible. The toileting goal will not be possible on an online setting. So that when we return back to school, then the focus will come to work on that particular goal. And in that plan will be how they're going to address the goals that can be done in the virtual setting, as well as the goals that can't be, and how they will be provided the time.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
I have one, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes, that was, if I remember correctly, there was one session during the virtual conference where they talked about using material around the house. I know right now with the students being virtual and being remote, that sometimes with our EC students, there's things as far as physical therapy that they can use around the house that may help them. I know in one of the sessions they did talk about STEM activities of things that can be used around the house to build things, to build historical monuments, to build models. So there's things that I know that probably this would help that parents can do at home while they're waiting for everything to get started. And I'm sure that the EC students will be served in some form of fashion until they can get all the material that they need for the contingency plan, because it's going to take time to have meetings with each and every student. As Mr. Farmer said, it's going to take time. It's going to have an IEP meeting and to get everyone involved. But there are things that can be done around the home with the student. I'm sure the teachers can give suggestions to those parents. And I know this new norm is really making everyone anxious. But I always tell everyone is to just be patient and it will come through. And hopefully we just put the best interests of our students at heart and do all we can for them so that their needs will be met. But we're not going to let them be by the wayside by no means, because they do have plans in place and they probably have to be sort of changed a little bit since we're in this new norm now. I feel like I'm a teacher of the caveman days now because of all that we're doing now with the chisel and the rocks. Because, now we're virtual academy and
Bedrock
technology.
School of Education.
Yes, it's so different. And I just retired in 2014. So, but it's the change and we have to adjust to the change. It's going to take time.
New day.
All right, thank you. Now, is there anything else in regard to 2020, 2021 reentry plan C? If not, we're going to move forward to contracts requiring board notification. Dr. Mills?
Madam Chair, you have one contract, board members, that is just for notification. Mr. Mayo is on the line. This is for touchscreen Lenovo Chromebooks for pre-K from the Trinity 3 business, the amount of $41,389.11. Any questions on that? This is for information.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Any questions or comments, members of the board? This is the informational piece.
Just a comment, Dr. Fetch, just watching the news today, they were talking about a potential shortage of Chromebooks and laptops. We're not running into any difficulty, are we, Mr. Mayo?
Yes, ma'am, we are. That's with the sense of urgency, trying to get this approved tonight. We've been working with several vendors, trying to see who could provide. That was part of our RFP process. To this particular bid, quote that you're looking at is actually writing the next one that Dr. Mills is getting ready to present to you. So we were able to ride the coattails of that. And hopefully the inventory is going to be in and ready to go.
Okay. All right. So this is the contract that is just the notification. It is under the threshold that requires no approval. So that piece is informational. It's the next piece which will require board action, which is the Trinity 3 touchscreens, as well as the additional piece, which was the Verizon hotspots that we added to the to this item.
Yes, Madam Chair, board members, and Mr. Mayo is right here to assist. You have two on the proceeds as originally presented, which are from Trinity 3, which is the contract provider from the business. The first one is for touchscreen Lenovo Chromebooks. Again, we try and standardize on that with charging carts for when we are back in. That is in the amount of $682,514.67. And then you have another from Trinity 3 again, where there's actual product available. That's for the Lenovo ThinkPad laptops for the middle school teachers. You'll notice that's the difference from Chromebooks. That amount is $185,531.50. And again, we've got Mr. Mayo sitting right there with his finger on the button to make a purchase as soon as we get done. But the other one that we added, if it's okay to add at this point, Madam Chair, would be for the Verizon hotspots. If that's okay with you, I can add that to there now. And that is to allow us to purchase additional hotspots for remote access while we have them. And can look, and we've used up the 250 that we did have.
This is for 500. Is this what you're?
Here it is. It is for 99,000 for additional hotspots and 1 year of service. So those three contracts do require board approval.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, did I miss anything?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm sure that not only are the Chromebooks with short supply, but also the hotspots, because every time you turn on the news, the systems are talking about the hotspots being purchased as well as the Chromebooks. And so this is critical if we're going to meet the needs.
And for the record, these aren't just purchases to purchase from the CARES Act. These are part of our replacement plans and refurbishment plans. So I wouldn't want someone from the outside to think we're just trying to use up funds to spend that down. This is part of the process we would follow anyway. But the timing of it certainly is important, and the timeliness of it is important. So that's an important part to consider.
All right, you've heard the request from the administration to allow them to make purchase of the Trinity 3 touchscreen Lenovo Chromebooks and charging carts, the Trinity 3 Lenovo ThinkPad laptops for the middle school teachers, and additional hotspots from Verizon so that we can meet the connectivity needs of our families. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Breen?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the Trinity 3 contract regarding the touchscreen Lenovo Chromebooks and charging carts, Trinity 3 contract regarding the Lenovo ThinkPad laptops for middle school teachers, and the Verizon contract for the 500 additional hotspots and 1 year of service.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the administration's request for the Trinity 3 touchscreen Lenovo Chromebook and charging carts, Trinity 3 Lenovo ThinkPad laptops for middle school teachers, and the additional hotspots and 1 year service from Verizon. Please respond. Is there any discussion? Please respond. Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
And Dr. Fitch? Aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next is the action item in regard to contracts we just did the contracts requiring board approval. Athletics update.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'll be presenting an athletics update and
All right.
also a proposal for athletic workout schedule. In regards to information shared by Mr. Tillman, I want to thank Mr. Tillman for his due diligence and everything that he does leading our athletics programs here in the district and staying on top of what we're doing at the state level. I'll share my screen to give a few points.
We do not have your presentation, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
For tonight, I wanted to start by giving some athletic updates. This is the approved sports calendar from the High School Athletic Association. It lists which sports will be starting and which days. Cross country and volleyball to begin on November 4th with the first competition date of November the 16th and a final contest of January the 8th. They transition into winter sports. What we wanted to point out was football. Football would be scheduled at this time to have a first practice date of February the 8th and a first competition date of February the 26th, and to end with a final competition date of the 9th. At this time, we do not have information regarding playoffs. That's not been decided at this point, but we do have a approved plan from the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. As a result, myself and Mr. Tillman collaborated on what we would potentially want to present to the board in terms of beginning our athletics and supporting our student athletes, as we know now when the scheduled dates of competition will begin and which sports to begin with. which brings us to our proposal for tonight. We would like to propose to the board that we begin our workouts on September the 21st. At this time, it would be open to all sports that are allowed to work out based on the North Carolina High School Athletic Association guidelines at that time. So when, with board approval, if we begin our workouts on September the 21st, the sports that are allowed to work out from the state, from the High School Athletic Association, we would work out with those sports. We would continue to follow all the High School Athletic Association guidelines that are in place at that time. Those guidelines have been tiered and have been utilized at our campuses, and all of our athletic directors and our trainers have been trained, and our coaches as well. Middle school athletics, the plans will be at the discretion of each LEA at this time, and I'll let Mr. Tillman speak to some information actually we received today regarding middle school athletics before we conclude.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. And I would like to ditto what Mrs. Barnes and Madam Chair said. I'd like to welcome Dr. Williams. He has been a great addition to our staff and brought a vast amount of knowledge to us and been a big help. So we really appreciate him being here. We did receive notification from Burt Jenkins with Department of Public Instruction on Friday. And basically what they've done is left up the jurisdictions of middle school athletics up to the LEAs. When to start, how to start, what we're going to do. Angie Miller, who's the athletic director of Nash County, and myself reached out to DPI about a month ago, and we got permission from them that if all else fails, that we would start our athletic seasons on January the 1st. And it would be very similar to what the North Carolina High School Athletic Association has proposed, that we would start first with winter sports with abbreviated season, and then go into the fall sports, have another abbreviated season, and then finish up with the spring sports. This would enable that our student athletes would have some kind of athletic seasons. Keep in mind that the dates that we shared with you from the North Carolina High School Athletic Association, I talked to Commissioner Tucker last week, and that these are moving targets. If the numbers continue to rise and the governor doesn't move us to the next phase, then all this is subject to change. So let's just hope and pray that we can get started on those dates, because it is a very good plan and it makes a lot of sense. And I think the association did a good job of collecting information from athletic directors, presidents of the conference, the ad hoc committee, and the board of directors in coming up with this plan.
Thank you, sir. And our decision points for this proposal, September 21st allows for development of updated North Carolina High School Athletic Association guidelines and the monitoring of our safe environments. September 21st is close to the beginning of entering for our Plan B. And the earliest date for the first practice would be November the 1st. So our proposal again would be to begin workouts for our high school sports on September the 21st with the sports that are allowed to work out from the North Carolina High School Athletic Association guidelines at that time. And myself and Mr. Tillman are bringing that to the board for approval tonight.
Can I ask you to please put that first screen back up?
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
Mr. Tillman, I'd like to direct this question to you if possible, sir. Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
I
sir.
hear you.
Yes, sir.
Has there been discussion, especially in the spring, because football will siphon off a lot of participation from other sports? So has there been discussion about not only dual participation in a sport or trial participation in a sport? Or is that left up to the coaches, or how will that be mandated?
Well, it is legal to have dual participation with the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. And as you look at this schedule, there is a lot of overlapping. So our coaches are going to have to work together on sharing athletes. And there's a lot of things that we're going to have to be flexible on and accomplish this schedule. far as facility wise, transportation wise, the number of contests you could have in a day. So there's a lot of things that we've got to work out, but it's very doable and we'll get it done if we can follow through with it. But yes, sir, I'm having a meeting Wednesday with all the ADs and coaches, and we'll be discussing about having the cooperation between coaches on dual participation if an athlete chooses to do so.
Thank you, sir.
It was I thought my understanding was that fall sports would be moved into the spring. But yet I'm seeing on this cross country beginning practice in November, basketball in December. Are these not fall sports?
Yes, ma'am, but what they did, the association did away with categorizing everything as a fall, winter, and spring, and started it with low-risk sports first. Like cross-country is considered, and volleyball is considered low risk. And then they were going to move on into the high risk, hoping by then that maybe the numbers were down.
Are there other questions?
One question, Madam Chair, this
Mrs.
is
Boyer.
very, is there a logical reason for cross-country, swimming and diving, and track and field only having 10 contests while so many others have 14? I understand football just having 7.
No, ma'am, I can't. The only thing I can say is that the other sports that have 14, that you can play 2 in a week. And of course, cross country, you could also do 2 of those in a week. So I don't know why the committee went from 14 to 10 in those particular sports.
But those sports also typically lend themselves to meets.
That's
correct?
right.
So
Yeah.
you can,
And swimming and diving is based on the use of the facilities that we use in the Rocky Mount YMCA.
Okay.
And one thing I would like to add, the one thing that when Dr. Williams and I was trying to find a target date to start practice, we wanted to make sure that our students were in that 5th week of remote learning and have become acclimated to the school year before we threw something on like far as starting workouts. And also that the coaches and the teachers were.
Are there other questions?
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I'd like to direct this to Mr. Tillman also. Mr. Tillman, we know that sports are great for kids, but it also, it has to be financially feasible to carry on some of these sports because they're very high dollar. And I'm talking about football carrying the load. Have you all talked to any at all about how the fans will be allotted to games, or will we have games where no fans will be able to come?
There's been discussion, but nothing has been decided on that. This discussion has ranged from playing in front of no one, which as you well know would be devastating financially, to having 50% capacity. That was the 2 plans that I've heard. I've not heard anything that said 100% capacity, but I have heard about playing with no fans, itself parents, and 50% capacity. That's the only 2 plans I've heard that's being discussed.
Thank you.
Other questions? Members of the board, this is an action item. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen?
I move to adopt the Wilson County Schools High School athletic workout proposal.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mrs. Boyette and Mr. Mercer, that we approve the Wilson County, North Carolina High School Athletic Association approved plan for athletics. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-1. Thank you very much. Next on the item are the draft and the revised policies. We have had first reading of these policies at our meeting on the 10th of the month, and they are before us tonight for second read. Do you want to handle them in mass? Do you want to handle them individually? What is your pleasure?
Mass.
Mass.
Yes.
Mass.
Well, I think the consensus is that these will be handled in mass. So the chair is open for a motion.
Madam Chair.
I heard Mr. Breen beat you, Mrs. Boyette. I'm going to let him do.
But
and
she was so much more enthusiastic
She
than I
was very enthusiastic. I'll get a second. I'll get an enthusiastic second. Okay, Mr. Breen.
Madam Chair, I'll move that the board approve the policies listed on the agenda under Roman numeral 7, discussion action items, letter C, draft and revised policies 1 through 19 as a second reading, and repeal the corresponding policies as set forth in the handout dated August 17th, 2020.
Mrs. Boyette, would you like to second that?
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded that the board approve the policies listed on the agenda under Roman numeral 7, discussion action items, letter C, draft and revised policies as a second reading, and repeal the corresponding old policies as set forth in the handout dated August 17th, 2020. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mr. Breen?
Nay.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion passes 6-1 with Mr. Breen in dissent. And please note on that last motion, Mrs. Horrison, that motion passed 6-1 with myself, Dr. Fitch, casting the dissenting vote. Okay. We are now down to item D, CEP expansion. Ms. Talton, I think that's you.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
All right.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I am excited to discuss CEP expansion with you. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you may see these slides.
All right.
Okay. As you may recall, we've discussed CEP a few times this year. We have discussed the groupings that are already in place, and we will go over those groupings in a moment. But I am coming to you with a proposal and a new grouping possibility. Back in April, I believe it was, the board voted to keep the current CEP groupings as they are for the last possible year, which is the school year 2021, to reevaluate those in the spring of 2021. So those, it's important to know that those will not be touched in this expansion. Those will remain the same as it was voted on previously. This is, again, just another overview of the community eligibility provision guidelines as we have looked at previously. The community eligibility provision allows for the nation's highest poverty schools and districts to serve breakfast and lunch at no cost to all enrolled students without collecting applications. And then the guidelines for that are schools with a greater than 40% direct certified or identified student populations are eligible for the community eligibility provision. The grouping, a school or a grouping of schools with 62.5% or higher of that direct certified rate are reimbursed at a rate of 100% free reimbursement based on the 1.6 multiplier. And then the next couple of slides are just a brief recap of the groups we currently have. This group A includes Barnes, Frederick Douglass, Hearn, Jones, Vick, and Winsted. All of these schools go together into a grouping, giving us an identified student percentage of 62.8 and a percent reimbursed at the free rate of 100.48. So 100% simply. And this again is our second grouping that is current. This one also will not be touched based on previous decision in this decision process. Those include Daniels, Darden, Gardners, Lee Woodard, Lucama, Stantonsburg, Wells, New Hope, Rockbridge, and Vincent Bynum. And that identified student percentage is 43.77, so quite a bit lower, with a 70.02% reimbursed at the free rate. And then this following slide is the proposed grouping, which actually includes all of the remaining schools. So this proposal would allow for all remaining schools in our district to become CEP or under that provision. And this grouping altogether gives us an identified student percentage of 53.7%, with 85.92% being reimbursed at the free rate. And this data actually is from May of 2020. That was the required date for 2020 was May rather than April. And the numbers went up pretty in a favorable manner. Those went up in May to be able to qualify these remaining schools.
So this means that the entire district is now eligible under these guidelines.
Yes, ma'am.
And, we had been discussing whether or not, if we maintained the formula that we had been using, that would put us in some jeopardy.
It does, there would be, and Ms. Towson could expand and explain that much better than me about what there might be some cost factors. However, I think if we're going to take the opportunity to do something for the district this year to help families and to make it easier for everyone, then now is the time to do this, which is to put us under the umbrella of all of it and make the changes later, because if not, then we've got to do the process of verification and paperwork and all the other things. And then that's when Ms. Towson came back to us, and Dr. Williams and Dr. Wilson, her staff, and Dr. Williams and his staff, we all looked at it. And my recommendation would be if at any point it's easier, make it easier on families and the process, because there is no extension of the summer feeding program right now.
Right.
We waited for guidance for that, and on Friday they said no, which means we've got to go through the process of numbers and do everything else. And so it's making it harder on families at a time when I don't think it should. So if this makes it easier, and Ms. Towson can answer some questions about how we can overcome some things, which we can, I just think this would be a good thing to do for our system.
I'm not in disagreement.
I knew you
I'm
meant
not
that
in
for a second.
disagreement, but this makes it even more urgent, even more necessary that we do something with community partnerships
Yes,
to make sure that we're not leaving
I agree.
students hungry because they cannot get to a site
That's right.
to be able to pick up a meal. And so I think that's urgent.
You know, we had looked at using our buses and bus drivers to do some of that, and they would not allow that. I mean, that was not an allowable expense. We considered lots of different things that would make sense to us to do, but just aren't allowed. So you're exactly right. We need to do that as a district, and districts around the state have to do the same thing. But this one step will get us that much closer to doing it. Ms. Talbot, again, and her staff have done an amazing job, and I think we should transition back to where we were headed. But now it's probably not the time to make the move to what we were talking about, because who could have planned for a pandemic
Right.
at the time we were setting ourselves up to do that?
And now they talk about a twindemic because of flu on top of coronavirus.
Ms. Talbot, did I get that right?
Yes, absolutely. I would second everything that was said. I do think that it's important to keep at the forefront that in the spring of 2021, we as a district and a board, as the board, will not have an option but to act on the first two groupings, Group A and Group B. This 2021 will be the final year that we're allowed to keep those. Which will revert back to some of that conversation that we had back in February.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would second everything that Dr. Mills mentioned about doing all that we can to ensure that our students can eat at no cost this year.
Okay.
We're just moving the decision down till
Till a
things are
later
different.
point, yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I know we talked about our community partners getting involved to help out with those individuals that don't have transportation, but I honestly believe in my heart, knowing Wilson like I know it, that the faith community, if contacted, will be ready and able to make this happen.
Well, Dr. Williams has indicated and assured us that they will be getting on this tomorrow, ASAP, so that we can have this to begin, because we just opened school today. The feeding as we have been doing it is no longer there. And so we know that there are going to be children that are hungry. And so I think those discussions will be taking place in a very timely manner, Mr. Farmer, so that we can make this happen for our students to help eliminate some of the hunger. So this is an action item, and the floor is open, and I'll entertain a motion for the.
This time,
I'm sorry. Yes, you may, Mrs. Boyette.
Going once.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the new CEP grouping so that all of our children can eat free, K through 12, K through 13.
I second.
It has been moved and twice seconded. Moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mrs. Barnes and Mr. Mercer, that we approve the CEP expansion program as provided by the administration, so that all of our students K-12 are eligible for free meal, breakfast and lunch. Is there any discussion? Let me ask the maker of the motion and ask a question, because it's open for discussion now. Does this include our pre-K? Or is this just K-12, Ms. Talton?
This will include the pre-K that currently eat under the community eligibility provision.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Any other questions? So I have restated the motion, so I'm ready to take a count. Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. Farmer?
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I move that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 U.S. Code 1232G to establish or give instruction concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321. To consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please record your vote. Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned to closed session.